In 1887, a 23-year-old woman named Nellie Bly was committed to the infamously unsavory mental institution on Blackwell Island. She spent 10 days in harsh and violent conditions until her release. She had much in common with the other patients left and forgotten within the dingy and sickening walls. She was completely sane. But what would make a sane person go out of her way to be committed to an insane asylum? Nellie Bly was actually born as Elizabeth Jane Cochran on May 5, 1864. Her father, Michael, founded the town they lived in, Cochran's Mills, Pennsylvania, and also served as a judge. But after his sudden death when she was only 6 years old, no one could claim the right to his estate because he never completed a living will, leaving them with nothing. But Elizabeth pressed on, and later enrolled in a small college in Indiana, Pennsylvania with the aspiration to become a teacher. But the lack of money forced her to abandon her dream and return to her hometown. A writer for the local paper, the Pittsburgh Dispatch, who was known to readers as the Quiet Observer, claimed in an editorial piece that the working woman was a monstrosity, and they were better suited for domestic duties. Elizabeth submitted a racy response to the piece, which caught the attention of the editor, who offered her a writer's position. It was then in 1885, at the age of 21, that she took up her pen name, Nellie Bly. She took on topics such as sexism and women's rights issues. She also did undercover investigative reporting where she exposed the poor working conditions in sweatshops. She even spent 6 months in Mexico to expose the living conditions under the rule of dictator Porfirio Diaz. By 1887, Bly left Pennsylvania and started working at the New York World publication, famous for its yellow journalism. 23 years old at the time, she was tasked with investigating the mental institution located on a nearby island. The Blackwell Asylum was rumored to be bleak, depraved, and dangerous. The asylum was only one of many public institutions located on the island. There was also a penitentiary, a poorhouse, and a sanitarium. To infiltrate and uncover all the secrets the island was hiding was going to take great planning and moxie. She and her co-workers decided the best course of action would be to have Nellie formally committed under an assumed name. She took a room at the local boarding house and wandered the streets giving her best, crazed, performances to add credibility to her mental instability. Eventually, the police were called, and Bly, who claimed to be a Cuban immigrant and suffering from amnesia, was sent to a hospital to be evaluated. There, she was diagnosed with a plethora of psychological ailments and was sent to Blackwell's Island in the East River by ferry. When Bly arrived at the institution, around 1,600 people were living there. But the hospital was originally built to only hold 1,000 patients, and there were only 16 doctors attending to them all. The asylum was short-staffed and under-trained due to steep budget cuts over the years, and their mainstay treatments were more harmful than healing. What Bly saw and experienced was harrowing. She and her fellow inmates were subjected to psychological and physical abuse. Control tactics such as ice baths and movement constriction were rampant and severe. Some were forced to sit in wet clothing after their ice baths or sit on a bench for hours without being allowed to speak or move. When they did eat, the food was moldy, rotten, and unsanitary. If you complained, you were beaten or worse. What shocked Nellie Bly most was the fact that many of her fellow inmates were not insane at all. They were immigrants who couldn't communicate in English with law enforcement to explain their situation. The Blackwell institution was a place where women who have fallen through the cracks eventually land. If you were a poor woman and without support, yet completely sane, you may still be committed for life as a convenience to the public, to simply keep you out of the way. After 10 days, her editor arranged for her release. Once her first articles were published within the first few days of escaping the asylum, they became an instant sensation. A full-scale investigation resulted from the expose, and with help from Bly, the New York District Attorney's Office paved the way for improvements and changes in the public care system. But the Blackwell Institute didn't make it an easy pathway. They were tipped off on the impending investigation and completely transformed their building. They scrubbed the walls and floors, brought in fresh water and food, and anyone that Nellie had spoken to about their abuse at the asylum had been transferred or released before they could be interviewed. They didn't succeed in their ruse, and a $1 million bump to the funding for mental institutions was pushed through. They made important changes to staffing and the process for being committed. The piece made her one of the most famous journalists in the world. She continued to make headlines with her 1889 trip around the world. She circumnavigated the globe all by herself in 72 days, breaking the record by a week. She continued to write and shed light on the more intimate affairs of the world until she died in 1922.